If you're looking to get an electric vehicle charging point installed but you don't know where to start, then this video is for you, because today we're going to reveal to you the 10 things you need to know before you get an electric vehicle charging point installed. I'm Jordan from Artisan Electrics, and I was one of the first people to make YouTube videos about electric vehicle charging points. As a company, we fitted hundreds of them and we've learned a heck of a lot which we want to share with you in this video. As a customer, there are 10 basic things that you need to know in order to get a good quality and safe installation done by your installer. So come in and let's show you. Hopefully this video is going to provide you a ton of value. So if when you get to the end you think that this has been a valuable video, then I'd really appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up and share it out with somebody else who might benefit. Let's get into it. We're here at our customer's property and we've just finished fitting this Hypervolt electric vehicle charging point. This is our top recommended EV charger right now because it ticks most of the boxes in terms of quality, safety and features. Now I must say that all 10 points in this video are important, but not all will apply to you depending on your circumstances. However, point 10 is a point that applies to everybody in the UK, and it's one that not a lot of people think about when planning an EV charger install, so make sure you watch to the end of the video to find out that point. The first thing you need to know is what size is your main cutout fuse. Now you might say, what even is a main cutout fuse? I didn't even know I had one. Well, come with me and I'll show you. This here is your main cutout fuse. This is essentially the main protective device or fuse that controls the entire power coming into your house, and it limits how much power you can pull in from the grid. For this property, it's labeled up as 100 amps. That means that your property can pull in 100 amps from the grid without blowing the main fuse. And that all depends on the size of cable that's supplied from the grid to your property and the loads within the local area. So it could be that there are a lot of heavy loads in the local area and you're restricted to 80 or 60 amps, for example. Now, why do you need to know what size this main fuse is? Well, the reason is that an EV charger is a significant load that's being added to your property. A 7 kilowatt EV charger will pull 32 amps of power constantly throughout the time that you're charging the car. So maybe overnight you're charging up from 0 to 100%. That's going to be 8 to 10 hours pulling 32 amps. And if your main fuse is not big enough and you've got lots of other loads going on in the house, you could end up blowing this main fuse and losing power completely to the property, which would be a disaster. So we need to know before we can do your installation what size is your main fuse. If it's 100 amp, that's great. We can install the charging point without any prior permissions needed. But if it's 60 amp or 80 amp, we need to apply to your distribution network operator to get permission in advance to connect the charger, and they may need to come out and upgrade your main fuse to a bigger one before we can do the installation. So where can you find your main fuse? Well, usually it's in your meter box, your electric meter box if you've got one. For most people, they're on the outside of the house. It's like a white box. But some people don't have a meter box and their meter is on the inside of the house on a board, maybe in a cupboard under the stairs, or like this in the garage. In this case, this is a very old Bakelite one, which is why it's sort of brown, dark brown, black color. Modern fuses, cutout fuses, look like this or this. So they're grey in colour, and they usually have a black label with white writing on them which states the rating of the main fuse. Now, in addition to the main fuse, we need to know the size of the tails that are coming from your main fuse into your meter. We've got a really old ancient meter here, but we've got 25 millimeter squared tails coming out, which means they can handle the 100 amps. Now, some properties have a 60 amp main fuse and the tails are only 16 mil, which means that not only do you have to get your fuse upgraded, but you have to get your tails upgraded as well. And that's something that the meter company need to do. So your energy supplier, whoever it might be, they will need to arrange for these tails to be upgraded to 25 square millimeters. And your DNO or distribution network operator will need to arrange for your fuse to be upgraded. Then this side of the meter is the consumer side. This is the side that you own, and your electrician will need to arrange for those tails to be upgraded, the tails that go from your consumer unit to the meter. So there's quite a bit of coordination involved to make sure everything is safe and up to scratch before you get an EV charger installed. But that's the first point. Let me show you the second point that we need to think about. Apart from your main cutout fuse and meter, there's another fundamental element to your installation, which is your consumer unit or fuse box. Now you might have one consumer unit in the house or multiple, like in this property where it's a big house. They've actually got 2 consumer units here. And the question that you need to answer is, are there spare ways? In other words, is there available space in your consumer unit to add a new circuit for an EV charger? So let's show you this property as an example. They've got this big consumer unit here. So you've got your main switch, you've got 2 RCDs, and then these are what we call circuit breakers, or MCBs, miniature circuit breakers. Now this is completely full. As you can see, there's no space in there for us to add any new circuits. So what about this one? Well, in here, there is one spare way here. You can see this little blank, which means that technically we could fit a new circuit in there, but there's a problem. The regulations for EV charging points state that each EV charging point needs to be protected by its own dedicated double pole 30 milliamp type A RCD. RCD stands for residual current device. It's basically one of these. Most people who have a modern consumer unit will either have an RCD or they'll have circuit breakers that have RCD protection built in, known as RCBOs. Now, because this RCD is protecting all of these circuits, we can't just bosh a circuit in on the end for the EV charger, because this RCD would not be dedicated for the EV charger. It's being used for all of these other circuits as well. So unfortunately, although there's a spare way here, we can't use it. Now what about this part of the board? Well, here it's completely full as well, no spare ways. So what that means is, although they've got all of these consumer units, we can't add a new circuit to the existing consumer unit. So what do we do? In this case, we have 2 options. Either upgrade the existing consumer units, which in this case would be a bit crazy because they're pretty new and modern anyway, or add an additional consumer unit, which is what we've done on this installation. We've installed a dedicated EV charger consumer unit here. So it has a main switch and a 40 amp RCBO for the EV charger. And there's a couple of spare ways in there as well. So we've given the customer a bit of room for future expansion if, say, they want to add a second EV charger in the future, or maybe they want to add solar or battery storage. So this is what we've done in this case. And sometimes it's the only solution. I prefer to take a holistic approach and add to existing consumer units where possible, but often that will mean upgrading the existing consumer unit. So for example, if you've got a really old rewirable fuse box like this, then it's probably time for an upgrade. So we would recommend an EICR and a consumer unit upgrade. If your consumer unit is plastic like this, then we would probably recommend having that checked, doing what's called an EICR, or electrical installation condition report, testing out all the wiring, upgrading the consumer unit, and then having a new one fitted with plenty of space with a new EV charger circuit and getting everything done and up to scratch properly. Because when you're adding an EV charger to an existing system, you're adding a significant load. You want to make sure that the existing electrics are safe to add to. But that being said, in a situation like this with 2 modern consumer units, there's no point in upgrading these. It's better to just add an additional one. Now there's a big mistake that a lot of installers make, and I'm going to talk to you about that next. Now if your electric meter is outside in a meter box, what we see a lot of installers doing is putting in an outside consumer unit next to the meter box. But there's an issue with this. One, outside consumer units are just not a good idea because eventually they will get water or insects in them. But the other thing is the cold. A lot of consumer units are not designed to be outside, and the characteristics of the RCD and the protective devices within them mean that actually it may not trip if the outside temperature is too low under normal fault conditions. So just be careful if your installer is offering to put an outside consumer unit in. It's something that we would not recommend because it's not really the safest way of doing things. Now there's something else that I forgot to talk to you about over by the meter that's really important. Let me show you that. So another thing you really need to check is whether you have a looped service or not. Now, what is a looped service? Well, essentially the cable that feeds your house from the supply in the street or the overhead supply, this cable here it can be one of two things. It can be a dedicated service where you just have one dedicated cable from the street coming in, like in this particular case, or it can be what's called a loop service, which is where you have the supply cable coming into your house and then it loops out and goes to your neighbour's house too. And that means that you're both essentially sharing the same supply cable. Now, to fit an EV charger on a looped supply is basically a no-go in most situations. So if you have a loop supply, you'll need to apply to your distribution network operator to get it unlooped, which often involves them digging stuff up, running in a new supply cable to your property. Now, if you're not sure whether you're on a loop supply or not, the best way is to check with the DNO. Usually they have a form on their website that you can fill out where you can do this, or ask your electrician as part of the survey process. A loop supply could look like this or this. Now, there's another important thing you need to know, and for that we need to go over to our main incoming water pipe. Come with me into this small cupboard and you'll find the main incoming water pipe. Now, what you need to be searching for is the main stopcock for your water. In other words, the internal tap where you would turn off and it would stop all of the water to your pipes. In this particular property, it's here. So you can see this is the main stopcock. How do we know that? Because we've got this blue alkathene plastic water pipe coming in. Then we've got a copper pipe and then this main tap. So if I turn that off, that's going to turn all of the water off to the property, and the customer has very sensibly labelled it up main stop valve, used when flooding, in emergency or on holiday. Everyone should know where this is because, just like our customer has remarked, is important to know in case of emergencies. But from an electrical point of view and a safety point of view, you need to check whether your main water pipe is earth bonded. So what do we mean? Well, you should have a green and yellow cable like this coming to a clamp which is clamped onto the pipe. Now, technically, if you've got a plastic incoming supply and the internal pipe work is plastic in your property, then it doesn't need bonding. But in this case, because you've got copper pipes, it does need bonding, and we've got a nice solid bonding connection on the water. But that also applies to the incoming gas and oil if you have oil coming into the property. So let's go and find the gas bond. So we're here at the gas meter and we're looking for the same thing, a green yellow cable clamped onto the outgoing gas pipe from the gas meter, which you can see we've got here. Now, often the gas meter will be in a box on the outside of the house, like the electric meter, or maybe in a brown box that's buried in the ground just out at the front of the property somewhere. But in this case, it's inside the garage. And we just want to check to make sure that that green yellow cable is big enough. So it should be 10 square millimeters. And it should be clamped on solidly to the pipe, which it is in this case. Now, for the water bond, often they're in the under sink cupboard. So if you can't find where your main stopcock is, always check the cupboard under the sink. It's often there, hidden behind loads of bottles of detergent. And the other option it can be sometimes is in an understairs cupboard. I've seen that, but most of the time they are in the under sink cupboard. For the gas bond, sometimes it's where the boiler is located as well. That's another option you might find it, or where the gas pipe comes from the outside into the property, just inside or just outside. They often bond it in that place. And if you've got oil, the gas bond will usually be at the boiler or where the oil pipe comes into the property. If you've got a metal oil tank or a copper pipe that goes from the oil tank to the property that's buried underground, then usually your oil will need bonding too. And this is all stuff that an electrician will be able to check for you if needed, but it's good info to give them in advance if they're doing a remote survey, because if the bonding is not done, that's going to need to be included in the quote for the job to make sure you get a safe installation. Now let's talk about your electric meter. So we're here at the electric meter, and this is quite an unusual one because it's one of the old vintage analog meters that spins around when you use electricity. Most people now have a digital meter or a smart meter, and we usually recommend that customers get upgraded to a smart meter before they have an EV charging point installed, so that they can benefit from some of those really interesting smart tariffs that give you a cheap overnight rate to charge your electric vehicle. But either way, no matter what meter you have, we will need to know your MPAN number. MPAN stands for Meter Point Administration Number, and you'll find it on your electric bill. It looks like this. This is basically the identification number for your electrical installation, your electrical supply at your property. And the reason we need that is that within 30 days of the install, we need to submit a notification to your DNO or distribution network operator to say that we've installed an EV charger at your property. They keep records of where all the EV chargers are installed because they need to know that the grid can handle all of those EV chargers. Imagine if everyone on your street installed an EV charger, they could start to have problems. So that's a requirement for us as an installer to submit that notification, either after the install's done if there's nothing that is of concern before the installation, or like I said earlier, maybe we need to do it in advance because the main fuse is only 60 amps, or you've got a loop supply, or there's some other reason for concern on the supply at the property. So make sure you get your MPAN number and send it through to your installer. Now, one of the most fundamental things you need to know is, where do you want the charging point to be located? So what are the kind of things that you need to be thinking about when it comes to choosing a location? Well, first and foremost, where are you going to park your electric vehicle? Is it going to be parked within the garage most of the time? In which case it probably makes sense to put the charger inside the garage. But if you're anything like most British families, the garage ends up being a storehouse and you park your vehicle outside. So in this case, we've got the charging point outside, but why did we choose to put it on this side of the garage and not the other side? There's a reason for that. Now, the reason we've installed this here is because the charging port on the car is here. Now, that's something you need to be thinking about in advance, is where are you going to be parking your car? What orientation are you going to be parking it in? And where on the car is the charging port located? For example, if you always pull in front ways, the charging point that's here would actually be on the opposite side of the vehicle, which might mean that you'd need a longer tethered cable to reach, or you might want to put it in a different location. And different vehicles have their charging ports in different locations. The Tesla is always the rear left-hand side, but with many vehicles it's on the front or on the opposite side of the vehicle. So it's worth doing your research to find out where the charging port is located, and think about which way you're going to park your car usually, and plan to put the EV charger in the best possible location to easily reach the car. Then once you know where the EV charge point is located, your installer is going to need to know what is the cable route from there back to the consumer unit, because every EV charge point needs its own dedicated circuit in your consumer unit. So in this install, it was probably one of the easiest that you get. The cable is clipped neatly along through from the back of the charger, so you can't see any cable on the outside, and we've clipped it along through the garage straight to our dedicated EV consumer unit. As I say, one of the simplest cable routes you can ever have, but most of the time they're not that easy. So what you've got to be thinking about is, okay, from my consumer unit, how could an installer get a cable to where the EV charging point is located? How complicated that is going to depend on where your consumer unit is. If it's in the middle of the house with no outside wall nearby, it's going to need potentially floorboards getting up upstairs, or floor downstairs getting up, fishing underneath the floorboards, and it can get complicated. Or maybe running trunking through the house to hide the cable on the surface through the house. Maybe your consumer unit is on an outside wall and it's a case of drilling through the wall and running the cable on the outside to the charging port location, or it could be running the cable all the way on the outside of the house. And then when you get situations where you want the car charger to be installed in an external garage, for example, that's remote from the house, it's separate from the house, then we're talking groundworks, potentially to dig a trench, install a duct, and get a cable run out to that garage or outbuilding. Some people don't have a suitable location on the outside of the house, so they choose to have a pedestal mounted charger, which is a kind of a post where the charge point is mounted and it's freestanding. Now that can be really nice, but again, often it involves groundworks, installing a concrete base for the pedestal to go on so that it's solid, and making sure that it's protected so that it's not easily going to get knocked over by a vehicle. So there's a lot to think about with the cable run, and it can really help your installer if you show a video or some photos of where you want the charger to go and what the potential cable route would be from the consumer unit to get to the EV charger. Now let's talk about charging speed, because this is something that I hear a lot of people say, I want the fastest charging point possible. So the options are 22 kilowatt AC charging if you have a 3-phase supply to your property. A 3-phase supply looks like this, but most houses only have a single-phase supply. So an EV charger like this with a maximum of 7 kilowatts AC charging is the standard. Now you might think you want 22 kilowatt because you want the fastest charging point possible. However, the thing you need to find out is what speed is your vehicle capable of charging at? Because many vehicles, their onboard charger is not actually capable of charging at more than 11 kilowatt, for example. Some even as low as 3.6 or 7 kilowatt. For example, many hybrid vehicles won't charge at more than 3.6 kilowatt, even if you've got a 7 kilowatt EV charger like this. So charging speed is really reliant on multiple things. If you've got a 3-phase supply, then technically you can go up to 22 kilowatt, but does your vehicle have a 22 kilowatt onboard charger? You need to find out the answer to that question. Otherwise, it's pointless to put a 22 kilowatt charger in. Also, the question you need to think about is how fast do you really need to charge? Most people are going to come, they're going to top up overnight. Maybe they're at 50%, they want to get up to 90%. So they don't need a super fast charger. However, if you are doing a lot of miles, for example, in businesses, we find they need faster charging because they're often sending vehicles out. They want to top up quickly in a couple of hours and go out again. So it all depends on how much mileage you're doing and how often you need to charge up and how quickly you need to charge up. Now there is an option as well which is really interesting that we offer, which is quite new to the market, which is a DC bidirectional EV charger, and that's actually rated at 25 kilowatts 3-phase or 12 kilowatts single-phase. In fact, it's the only way to get more than 7 kilowatts out of a single-phase system, but it's expensive. And there's a video where you can watch more about that here if you'd like to find out a little bit more. It is a fantastic solution if you're looking for the Rolls-Royce of EV chargers. So that's charging speed. What else do you need to think about when it comes to choosing your EV charger? The other things that you need to think about are functions, brand, type, color, fit and finish, basically. For example, one of the basic fundamentals which is really important is, do you want a tethered charger or an untethered charger? Now a tethered charger is like this. It has the cable attached. You unwind the cable and you plug it into the vehicle. An untethered charger basically just has a socket on the front, which means you need to use a separate charging cable. Now most EVs come with a type 2 cable, maybe 3 or 5 meters long, but they're usually ugly, like yellow or green color. And it also means that every time you need to get the cable out of the boot and plug it in either end, which if it's chucking it down with rain is the last thing that you want to do. Plus if it's green or yellow and it's just hanging around your socket here, it just doesn't fit in, it doesn't look very nice. So I usually recommend that customers get a tethered solution like this. The other thing you want to think about is the look of your property. For example, here it's quite a nice modern property. The car is grey, the garage door is grey, so we've gone with space grey Hypervolt, which looks really smart and fits in with the look of the property really well. This charger comes in black or white options too. But there are other charge points out there that we install, for example, the Anderson charge points where you get all different colours and wood finishes. There's a Simpson and Partners charger, which is similar. It comes in multiple colours and finishes, and it's also a little bit more compact. If space is a limitation, then there are very small charging points that can be an option. So the look of the charger is something important to factor in. Now, the other thing you need to think about is what functionality do you need in your EV charger. For example, do you have solar and battery storage at your property? If you do, then you want an EV charger that can be integrated with those so that you don't just dump all your battery power into your EV every time, but you also want the functionality where the EV charger can see how much solar you're generating, and if you're exporting power to the grid, you've got the opportunity to actually re-divert that solar power into your car and effectively charge your car for free using your excess solar. Now the Hypervolt does that, and there are other options, different chargers that do that as well. It's definitely something to think about when it comes to choosing your charge point. The other thing that you want to think about is, does it integrate with some of the smart tariffs? For example, many of our customers are on Octopus Intelligent Go, or they want to be, and a charge point like the Hypervolt or several others on the market, has the opportunity to integrate automatically with Octopus Intelligent Go so that you can charge your car automatically on the cheapest possible rates. Now, some EVs are integrated with those tariffs themselves, so the charge point doesn't need to be. But some customers are going to be charging multiple vehicles, and then therefore they want the charge point to be integrated. Others just want to future-proof it, and they want the charging point to be integrated because of that. So does it have smart tariff integration? Does it allow you to work with renewable energy installations? Does it have scheduled charging? All of these are things that you need to think about before you choose the right charger for you. Now, there's one thing missing in all of these consumer units which we need to talk about. It's an important safety feature that not everyone thinks about. Let me show you what we've done over here. So this is a surge protection device, otherwise known as an SPD. And within the last couple of years, it's been incorporated into the wiring regulations that if you've got expensive electronic devices like an EV charger and an expensive electric vehicle, you should really have a surge protection device to protect those electronic devices in the case of surges that come down the power lines, or maybe even lightning strikes within the area, which are getting more and more common. So we install an SPD as standard if the customer doesn't have one. It is something that will add to the cost of the installation, but it's so important to protect yourself from potential surges in the future. And actually, the requirements state that if your installer is not going to fit an SPD, they need to actually write a risk assessment and get your permission to not fit one. So they should be fitting one as standard if you've not got one, or explaining to you in writing why they don't think it's necessary. Now, we've installed this, which is a main isolator switch with an SPD built into it. It's a nice solution for when you don't have an SPD. It can go in the meter box or near the meter if you can't fit one in your existing consumer unit. However, some surge protection devices are built into the consumer unit next to the main switch, or sometimes those little mini EV charging consumer units will have a dedicated surge protection device built in. Now, our final point, and this one is really important, is to think about the internet connection to your charge point. Now, you might think, why does it need an internet connection? Well, the UK has introduced smart charging regulations, which means all EV chargers need to have an internet connection. And that benefits you as a customer because it means that you can get regular firmware updates to improve your charger. You can also see how your charger is acting with your app. You can see how much power you're putting into your car, whether your car is fully charged or not. All of this information you can use in an app if you've got an internet connection to your charge point. But what a lot of people don't realize is that if you connect to your charger just via Wi-Fi, and then you change your router later, or you have an issue with your Wi-Fi router, you can lose the internet connection to the EV charger. So we always ask the question to the customers, where is your router? And if it's within a reasonable distance of where the EV charger can be, then we would recommend installing a hardwired Ethernet connection to the EV charging point. That means that even if you change your router over later, you're not going to have to recommission it and get your installer out to reconnect it to the Wi-Fi. It's as simple as plugging it into your new router. So we try to do hardwired Ethernet connection as standard for our customers. Sometimes it's not possible because the router is quite far away, but either way, you want to know, is there a good Wi-Fi signal where the charge point is located as well, so that you've always got Wi-Fi as a backup, even if it's not the primary internet connection mode. So think about internet connectivity. That's one thing I'd say that a lot of people forget about, and it's really important. So I hope this video has enlightened you to the world of electric vehicle charging and all of the things that are involved in getting a safe and high quality installation done. If you have found this video beneficial, it'd help if you hit a thumbs up and subscribe, but also why not share the video out for somebody else who you think might benefit from it. And if you are in the market for an EV charger and you'd like a quote, there'll be a link below to our virtual site survey tool, which makes it super easy for you as a customer to quickly go around and send us the pictures and videos that we require, that give you all of the things that we've covered in today's video. That will enable you to send us a package of information which will allow us to easily and quickly quote you for a high quality EV charger install. So there's a link below to that. But either way, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.